Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar entitled First Impressions Matter, Building a Standout Resume. I'm Chris Boomsma, CEO of the Council for Agricultural Science and Technology, or CAST, and it's my privilege to welcome you to today's event and let you know that we're doing this in collaboration with SIVB, or the Society for In Vitro Biology. We're happy to partner with SIVB and introduce to you some of their experts today. So before I get started, I'd like to tell you a little bit about CAST. CAST was formed in 1972 as a nonprofit organization designed to provide credible, unbiased, science-based information about food and agriculture to policymakers, the media, the private sector, and the public. And that mission continues today. A few facts about it. We are US-based, but we're internationally focused and connected. We do have a variety of memberships, both organizations and individuals. We have 3 work groups: animal, food, and plant, focusing on the hottest issues in agricultural science and technology today. And we are nonpartisan, science-focused, and everything we produce is free of charge. Now, our mission at CAST is to convene and coordinate networks of experts to assemble, interpret, and communicate credible, unbiased, science-based information to a variety of audiences. That includes policymakers, organizational leaders, educators, scientists, the media, the private sector, and the public. It is impossible to do this work without the great volunteer network that CAST has, both independently and, again, through collaboration with organizations like SIVB. So where do our volunteers come from? A variety of places. They come from academia, companies, government, and nonprofits. A variety of board members make up many of these volunteers, but so do our active task force members and our volunteer scientific experts that serve as authors, reviewers, and contributors. Now, if you'd like to learn more about CAST, I'd be happy to chat with you. You can reach out to me using the QR code on this screen that connects to my LinkedIn profile. You also may give me a call or reach out to me via email. And of course, click on the larger QR code on the screen at this time to explore more about CAST in general. So with that, at this time, I'd like to introduce one of today's co-moderators. That individual is Raj Deepika Chauhan, who serves as Director of Plant Transformation and Delivery Technology at Pairwise. With expertise in plant biotechnology, she's guided innovative crop improvement projects and helped turn scientific breakthroughs into practical solutions for agriculture. She also holds the position of SIVB Membership Chair. Welcome, Deepika.
Thank you, Chris. On behalf of the Society for In Vitro Biology, we are pleased to welcome everyone to this joint venture of CAST and SIVB. Founded in 1946, SIVB is a professional society with a mission to foster the scientific and technical growth of its members, conduct biotechnology research to understand biology at cellular and developmental level, to promote, expand, and support the scientific knowledge base for the benefit of our members. Our mission is accomplished through the Society's 2 world-class journals and an online newsletter, annual meetings and workshops, and through the support of teaching initiatives in cooperation with educational institutions. Today's webinar supports this mission. It is the second installment of our continuing webinar program. SIVB membership and education committees are working on additional webinars, so please keep an eye out for more webinars next year. If you are a member and haven't renewed your membership for 2026, or you aren't an SIVB member but want to support our mission, we encourage you to join the SIVB at members.sivb.org or just scan the QR code that is shown in the screen. Our membership is calendar-based, so all memberships will begin in January. Some of the benefits of joining SIVB include online access to our publications, discounted annual meeting registration rates, providing you the opportunity to share your research and network at these events, volunteer opportunities, and recognition through prestigious awards. SIVB will be holding our 2026 In Vitro Biology meeting at the Peppermill Resort and Spa in Reno, Nevada from June 6th to 10th, 2026. The program is being assembled now and looks to be an exceptional event with sessions on advancements in plant and animal technologies, natural and induced genetic variations, synthetic biology, and the use of AI tools and techniques in research, and so much more. Please scan the QR code to the right for more details of the program. We are thrilled to share that SIVB will be celebrating our 80th anniversary at next June's event with Sunday's keynote speakers Dr. Indira Visil and Delia Bethel, and a special reunion celebration on Monday, June 8th. I hope you will register to join us. Scan the QR code on the left or visit sivb.org/meetings for more information. Lastly, SIVB is thrilled to share the success we have achieved with our new postdoc mentoring program, Match, where postdoc members gain insights into trends and opportunities in plant and animal biology and biotechnology, knowledge from experts in the field to enhance their leadership and communication skills, and networked with the individuals who shared common interest. We will be filling positions for both mentors and mentees to participate in next year's program now. All participants need to be active SIVB members. Please reach out to the SIVB business office at sivb@sivb.org or just scan the QR code on your screen if you are interested in participating and contributing to the program. Now let's get started. At this time, I would like to introduce my co-moderator who will introduce today's two phenomenal speakers, Dr. Ian Curtis. Dr. Curtis is pioneer in plant transformation and founder of webinar series and Distinguished Scientist Award. Ian has been a member of SIVB since 2011. Since arriving in St. Louis in 2017, Ian has currently moved into consultancy, advisory, director, and scientific roles with several startup biotechnology companies, including Benson Hill Biosystems, Plastomics, Edison Agrosciences, Lone Wolf, and Upstream Biotechnology. Welcome, Ian.
Thank you, Deepika, and welcome everybody to these two presentations today. My first speaker will be Dr. Rishi Masalia. Dr. Masalia is a plant scientist, startup founder, and executive with over a decade of experience in agriculture, biotechnology, and climate technology. He has built and scaled multiple early-stage companies serving in leadership roles from co-founder to vice president. As the founder of Sage Advised Science, he now helps early career scientists transition into industry with practical expertise in crafting impactful resumes and CVs. Following Dr. Masalia, we will welcome Mr. Lasse Palomaki. He's an Associate Director of Career Services for Lumini at Elon University and founder of the Strategic Student LLC. With certifications in instructional design and design thinking, he has coached thousands of job seekers, delivered workshops in institutions such as Cornell, UCLA, and UT Dallas. His expertise lies in modern, practical job search strategies, blending technology with authenticity. Both presentations are completed. We will offer the opportunity to address any questions you may have. You're welcome to place your questions in the chat during each presentation, and we will share them with the speakers during the Q&A period. The webinar is being recorded and will be made publicly available soon. Now, with introductions out of the way, it is my pleasure to welcome Rishi Masalia, who will be sharing how to level up your application toolbox. Welcome, Dr. Masalia.
Yeah, thanks everybody for having me. Excited to be here. All right, so we're just going to dive on in. So as Ian said, I'm Rishi Masalia. I am the program director at 3 North, my day job, but I have a consulting company, Sage Advice Science, and a lot of this work is being done through that component. We're talking about an application toolkit today. So sort of an overview, talk about 4 things, mostly focusing on resumes, but I want to talk a little bit about shifting mindsets, then go into resumes, talk a little bit about cover letters, and a little bit about negotiation, because I think all these things are sort of tied together. And then throughout the presentation, I'll have both my social handles, so mine as well as Sage Advice Science. You can follow me on LinkedIn or reach out to me on LinkedIn. All right, so thinking about a shifting mindset. One of the things I want to sort of say at the top is that every academic has experiences relevant to industry. Since we're framing this as sort of an industry, sort of how are you getting or looking for industry positions? So every academic, whether you're a student, undergrad, graduate student, postdoc, faculty member, every academic has experiences relevant to industry, just to frame it that way. So a lot of folks are driving projects, even if they're related to their thesis. You are training teammates. Usually this is in the form of undergraduate students or fellow graduate students. If you're a postdoc, you might be training multiple people. Everyone's producing outcomes. A lot of these are in academia, typically in the form of publications or computational packages. Everyone's troubleshooted protocols. People have worked as collaborators. All these sorts of things are very relevant to industry. And a lot of folks, at least folks that I've coached and folks that I've talked to, a lot of them don't tend to think about their experiences in academia in this sort of way. You just have to sort of use industry language when talking about them. Another way to think about a mind shift in terms of resume building is that the goal of a resume, and by extension a cover letter, is not to actually get you a job. The goal of them is to get you an interview. So that, one, it takes a little less pressure, or puts a little less pressure off of you, in that it doesn't have to get you everything. But these documents are really not about chasing things like perfect formats. It's really about making smart choices with limited real estate, right? A resume is usually 1 to 2 pages. A cover letter is usually 1 page. And again, the goal of these things is to get you that next conversation. So that being said, you don't have to put everything in a resume. You don't have to put everything in a cover letter. You can say, hey, let me talk about the select relevant experiences I want to talk about as they're related to this job. And then you can say just a 1 little line sentence that says, if you're interested in other experiences, or I worked at this company, but I'm not going to talk about it because it's not super relevant for this job position, feel free to ask me in the interview. So both of those sort of mindset shifts bring me to this major point, which is that resumes and cover letters are effectively marketing pitches. The product is essentially you, and you are trying to sell your skill set to that company or organization. So we're going to talk a little bit about what that actually looks like. So resumes themselves, industry resumes are very different than academic resumes, and a couple of major reasons. One is that in industry resumes, you really want to highlight or showcase outcomes and impacts when you're talking about your work. And I'll give some examples in a few slides. It's less about saying you did something, I worked on whatever. You really want to say, I worked on whatever, and that resulted in XYZ. You also care more about the order of the information for an industry resume more than the length. Like I said, 1 to 2 pages for a resume is ideal. 2 to 3 pages is okay. You're not going to get thrown out for that. And Lasse might have more to talk about that later on. But the order of information, at least to me, matters. So you really want to put sort of your work experience at the top, especially for industry, and maybe things like education and awards down at the bottom, because people will stop sort of reading after a certain point in time. You also want to talk about publications. So everyone has publications if you're in the science field. And so one of the things that's very interesting when I talk to a lot of industry folks is authorship level sort of matters. So if you only put a select few publications because you're running out of space, but they're all first author publications, what that tells an industry person without any other information is that you don't really collaborate all that effectively. So you want to show different levels of authorship, some first author, some middle author, to show that you're actively working on teams and that those teams produce outcomes like publications. And then, like I said earlier, you want to be selective on what goes in a resume. You shouldn't have to put everything you've done. You want to match the relevant details to the job you're applying for. So that's sort of why it's a little bit more of a marketing exercise, more than just a, let me tell you everything I did. So one of the things I think about when I think about resumes, and this is an example of my resume, it's arguably slightly outdated from 2024 for me. One of the things I always start with at the top of my resume is obviously your name, location, email. I put my LinkedIn because that's a good social media way for people to look me up. The next thing I do at the top, this is literally the top of my resume, is I put keywords. So for those on the social media scene, think about ways people classify hashtags. This is sort of similar. I classify myself as a researcher and program builder, a communications expert, and a scientist. And then I have a tagline. Any good marketing exercise, you're going to have a tagline. People tend to remember those. You want your tagline to be something that is one sentence or less. And it's a way for people to sort of classify what you do, because people tend to put things into categories or buckets. So for me, I am very interested in the intersection of communication and science. So a lot of my things are geared towards that. But if I was applying to a very science-heavy role, this top portion would change. And they should change, at least in my opinion, for every job that you apply for, so that you are catering your resume to the job you're looking for. So after I have the keywords and the tagline, I then have a pitch. It's about a 2 to 3 sentence pitch of sort of who I am and who I am holistically, and what I would bring and skills I would bring to that position. All right, this is a lot of text. This is going to be recorded so people can look back at this, or you can take photos now. This is a chunk of my work experience that goes on my resume. Usually this is relevant to the most either recent job or the job you want to have, showcasing your skills the best for that job market. So I tend to work at startups. I love startups. Same sort of as Ian, we sort of operate in the same district and circles. But for me, a lot of companies don't know what other startups are. Some of them are small, some of them are in stealth mode. So I tend to describe what the startup does at the top, give people some context for what all of the information I'm going to provide them. The second thing I do is I then start to write bullet points, and I want those bullet points to have tangible outcomes of my work. And these things should be like, who have I interacted with? What specific partners have I interacted with? Are there different universities? Are there different collaborators or different labs? Are there different companies? How have I interacted with them? I also want to talk about impact of the work. So this example on the screen is stuff from my managerial days when I was a VP. So a lot of my impact and outcomes were related to management. So I talk about how many people did I manage? What types of roles did those people have? They were scientists, they were other managers, they were technicians in multiple locations. I wanted to ensure that they were getting support and training and had context. So I gave sort of these descriptive sentences around what each objective was for me. So a really good example is this sort of yellow highlighted section near the bottom, where we implemented a laboratory inventory management system, a LIMS, and electronic notebooks for the company. And so I pushed to have this at the company, not because I thought it would be interesting, but because we wanted to have a professional foundation for data management and curation in line with certain standards. And so normally what I see when people write resumes is they'll just say, hey, we implemented a LIMS system at this company, or I helped implement a LIMS system at this company. But you should always go the step further and say, what is the outcome and impact of that specific bullet point? All right, talk a little bit about cover letters in the last few minutes that I have. So I love cover letters. They're not always needed, but I think they're a great way to showcase your interest in the position and set yourself apart. So cover letters and resumes tend to go together when you submit them. Sometimes companies don't require a cover letter, but they do allow you to submit extra documents. So I tend to submit a cover letter. For me, a cover letter is the way you have a narrative for how you as a holistic person, you as a human, think you're a good fit for this position. In the way that a resume sort of outlines your skill sets and the context around your skills, The cover letter outlines who you are and how you would fit into that culture of a company. It also allows you to show passion for that specific company or mission. So I tend to have a structure when I'm building cover letters. First and foremost, they should not be more than 1 page. Anything longer, it's too much. People aren't going to read it. You should start with a quick introduction of you. You could theoretically regurgitate your resume mini pitch that I showed at the beginning at the top of a resume. You then want to move directly into sort of a few sentences of why you applied to this company. Show the passion for the mission, culture, work product. This also clearly indicates that you should not be reusing cover letters or resumes for multiple jobs. You want to make sure that they are targeted and specific. Next, you then want to talk a few sentences about why you would be a good fit for this specific job. How do your skills align? A lot of people in cover letters tend to just regurgitate their resume in paragraph form. So in this sort of section, the sort of why your skills are in alignment, you want to pick maybe 2 to 3 skills at most and really highlight why these things would be helpful to that company and why you're a good person to do that. And then finally, you sort of want to end with a few sentences around, if you were given the job, what would you do, right? So start thinking ahead, be realistic, think about onboarding, things like that. But it really shows that you're taking the effort to think about how would you operate in that context. And it sort of makes the hiring manager, think about like, oh, this person's already thinking about this. They are absolutely hitting what they should be doing in the first 90 days that they're on the job. Okay, last thing is negotiation. Negotiation for me starts with the resume and starts with the cover letter. It's a hard skill to learn, but really negotiation is sort of structured as a communication sort of technique where you're openly identifying sort of like what you're looking for and where your common ground is with the hiring manager and the company. So there's a few reasons why it's important to negotiate. One, typically raises are often based on your starting salary. So if you negotiate for a high salary, therefore your raises will be based on a higher number. You also sort of set the tone, like I said, early on in resumes and interviews, and you convey confidence and signal that you understand sort of what you're worth and what the market is at that point in time. There's this idea of like your actual value, the skills that you bring to a company, and your perceived value, which is your skills that you bring, but relative to the market that exists. So people can ask questions about relative versus perceived sort of value, but the other thing is that compensation during negotiations is more than just a salary or equity if you're at a startup, and I'll cover that in a second. And negotiations is a big thing. Negotiations don't stop once you've accepted an offer at a company, right? A lot of companies will do year-end reviews. That's another place where you can negotiate. So negotiations sort of happen all the time. And that's why I frame them as open communications where you're trying to identify common ground rather than like this one big milestone you do only when you're trying to accept or decline an offer. A big thing is managers, especially at companies, especially at big companies, expect you to negotiate, but you have to do your homework. So things like Glassdoor, looking for salaries, you can Google this sort of stuff now. But the biggest thing is talk to people, ask people, right? If you're in the plant sciences, like myself, the world of plant science is not that big. And a lot of people are willing to answer and talk to you about these sorts of things. So if you go to conferences like SIVB, these are great questions to ask other folks. My general rule on negotiating salary, I think a relatively safe ask is a 5% increase or a $5,000 increase, whichever is lower. So depending on what sort of job you're looking for. And then finally, you can ask for non-monetary compensations. These are things like increase or flexibility around paid time off or PTO, the ability to work from home. This is especially more common in a post-COVID world. So a lot more folks are open to this. You can think about educational resources, conferences, classes, hardware, software. If you're a communications person like me, do you have access to things like Canva or Adobe Suite? Do you want a MacBook instead of a Windows computer? Things like that. Especially if you're a computational person, that sort of thing will matter. And you can always negotiate titles. So slight changes to titles, things like that. These are all open to negotiation. And again, they don't have to be set when you accept or decline an offer. you can think about negotiation as you're ongoing. And that's sort of it. I'm also at time. So this is my information. Again, feel free to follow me on LinkedIn, ask questions. I'll be here to answer questions later. I also, as a plug for Sage Advice, I make resume and cover letter guides. They're both offered on my site. You can use the code SIVB for 25% off. But a lot of the stuff I sort of covered quickly in this seminar goes into a lot of depth for those. And I have a couple others on startups and science communication as well. And with that, thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Masalia, for a fascinating presentation. Now, I'd like to welcome Lasse Palomaki, who will be speaking on leveraging AI to optimize job seekers' resumes. Welcome, Mr. Palomaki.
Thanks so much, Ian, and thanks everyone for having me on the call today. I'm excited to chat a little bit about AI and kind of expand on what Rishi talked about and go beyond the piece of not just resumes, but adding that AI component to that. So what we'll focus on is using AI in terms of optimizing your resumes. When I say AI for today's purposes, we'll talk about ChatGPT. Now, there's a lot more AI tools out there outside of ChatGPT, of course, but I think that is the most general one, that the easiest to use, a lot of folks are familiar with. So that's why that is our focus today. If you feel like after the call like this, there must be something better for resume tools, you can absolutely do those searches online and find something that's the better fit for you. But I'll walk you through some foundational tips and strategies that you can utilize from ChatGPT perspective, once again, for your resume journey. Now, as we go through this presentation, of course, if you have questions, pop them in the chat. We can cover those afterwards. But let me give you just a foundational, once again, using ChatGPT to optimize your resumes. I'll give you some live demos along the way so you can see what this looks like in practice. So, leveraging AI, optimizing your job seeker resumes. We'll walk through examples, we'll walk through the foundation. But before we do any of that, I want to lay the foundation of what AI means today. The bottom line here is that we use AI every single day without realizing it in many cases, okay? So whether you're using AI as in ChatGPT, like we talked about, or using that for email communications or brainstorming or ideation or something else that might be work-related, or maybe you use it for personal use, such as meal plans or travel coordination or something like that. There's a lot of ways we can use ChatGPT, right? But outside of this, a lot of passive use we also have. So let's say Google Mail or Gmail or Outlook or something like that, right? Google Maps, Spotify, Amazon. Every single autocomplete on these mail tools, every single traffic reader on Google Maps, every single playlist that is proposed to you on Spotify, every single product suggestion on Amazon, every single movie suggestion on Netflix, these are typically guided by AI, okay? So once again, the foundation here is that we use AI every single day. But for today's purposes and for your career purposes, it's not about the passive exposure. What it really is about is that targeted use aimed at your career specifically. So once again, we're not asking AI to passively help us when we need it without really realizing that, but we want to leverage it to a very purposeful, strategic manner. And the way we do that, once again, is through some of the demos that I'll show you down the line here. Now, as you think about using AI, a lot of folks think that ChatGPT or other AI tools are this kind of like an output machine. Like we put in a prompt, we get an output, and we can just crank things out as quickly as we can, right? Resume iterations, cover letter drafts, interview prep, and so on, right? So it's just about replacing effort with speed, and that's not the goal here. We're not trying to replace effort. What we are trying to do is increase customization and accelerate the clarity that you have when we use these tools. So as we navigate through this, let me show you an example. Typically, in the past, let's say you're preparing for an interview, and I know resume is the topic for today, but I want to show you kind of like a off-tangent kind of example, still related to your career search. Let's imagine you're preparing for a clinical research coordinator interview. What you could do still today, and obviously many of you do, and many of us utilize this both today and in the past, we could type in simply in Google, job interview questions for clinical research coordinator. We get plenty of results right here, even some by Google's Gemini AI overview, if you will, right? So on the right-hand side, you'll see 15 great clinical research coordinator interview questions. We have a couple others from down the line here. Obviously, we scroll down, we'd find plenty more. So there's just kind of like a standardized set of questions we can possibly anticipate based on the idea of the position of a clinical research coordinator. But the downside here is that Google, if we do it from here, is not taking into account those individual details, individual aspects of a job in a specific company, in a specific team, tackling specific challenges, tackling specific problems. So this is a good foundation, a good start. But once again, with AI, we can be much more specific about this. So here's a screenshot. I'll walk you through some of these things here in just a moment. But the bottom line here on the left-hand side, you'll notice that we can use a prompt like, you're an interview preparation coach. Please help me anticipate likely interview questions based on a JD. follow these steps in order. First, do X. Here's the JD, blah, blah, blah. And the output we get is much more personalized, which means that it's much more helpful as you prepare for those interviews. Okay? So what we want to understand here is that AI is helping us passively every single day, but we can be very purposeful about how we use it to get a personalized output based on our needs. And once again, that can be in our personal life, meal plans, workout plans, or travel plans, and so on. But in terms of your career, we want to utilize to help us prepare for those interviews, for those resume steps, for cover letters, and even when we start out a position. So what you can use AI for, once again, are all of these cranking out things as quickly as we can, or we can be very strategic. And the bottom line here for you to understand is that really the job search today is not about just more hours, right? It's not about spending 20 hours a day or 18 hours a day. It's about spending whatever hours that are required, but being very focused on the tasks that we are looking to complete. And the way we can do that, once again, is through AI. Now, when you think about the modern job search, there's a bunch of steps that go along the way. And Rishi covered quite a few of these already. So the very first step, particularly as you think about your career path, you would identify, okay, what am I after, right? What are those steps that I want to take to get to a vision that I have for my career? And that vision might be initially clinical research coordinator. That might be a director at a company. That might be a VP at a company. It might be even a CEO of a company down the line. But we want to clarify direction. What are we after, right? And not just what are we after in 20 years, but what are we after today for the next 6 months, to 12 months, to 18 months, and so on. That's going to set us in a path to attain that goal, hopefully in the next X amount of weeks or months, okay? Once you have the North Star, what you want to do is build your materials, resume, cover letter, LinkedIn profile, etc. Then we start expanding our network. We have informational interviews with maybe alumni from our institution. Maybe we have recruiters. Maybe we have professionals doing the type of work that we want to do. We want to do interview prep, right? We want to be prepared for those informational interviews as well as job interviews. We can also negotiate for offers, just like Rishi noted right there. And then, once we get that offer, how do we start strong? What does our first 60 days or 90 days look like? And once again, the great thing about AI is based on our needs, we can really leverage AI through every single step along the way, okay? Now, I'm going to take a step back and once again remind us that today's focus is on resume, but I did want to show you the kind of scope that we can utilize resumes for, ChatGPT for, AI for, every step along the way. Now, I'm going to show you a couple of live demos on a resume specifically, but what I want you to keep in mind is as I break down the prompts that we're utilizing, you can use the same kind of methodologies or the approaches, if you will, to prompting for any one of these steps along the way. So you'll just change essentially the outputs that you're asking for, the inputs you're providing, kind of steps along the way, but the same approach in terms of prompting will apply. Okay. Now, as we think about the prompting itself, it's super important for you to understand that the output that you get is highly, highly dependent on the input that you provide for the tool. Okay. So if you go to ChatGPT and you provide a very basic general prompt that is vague and non-descriptive, the output that you get is not going to be awfully personalized to your needs. So to give you an example, a lot of folks that I work with, they might be current students, they might be recent graduates, or even folks who might be 10, 15 years down the line who are using ChatGPT, typically provide a prompt that is awfully vague, something like this, okay? Revise my resume for a clinical research coordinator job application. And then I'm going to copy my resume down there, okay? What ChatGPT will do for you is going to essentially research the idea of a clinical research coordinator, similarly as a Google would do, right? It's going to identify some key aspects of the jobs, generally speaking, not an individual job posting, but in general terms. It's going to look at your resume. It's going to start making some customizations, adjustments, and so on. It's going to give you an output, okay? But the difficulty with this is that the output that you get is awfully general. It's not going to be, once again, for an individual job posting. It's not going to be necessarily for your individual needs, but in more general terms. So at least we're providing a resume there, right? A lot of folks even utilize it by saying simply, provide a resume for me for a clinical research coordinator. Well, if you don't provide context on what you've done in the past, ChatGPT will not know what you've done, and it's not going to know how to customize your summary for you, how to customize bullet points for you. So once again, our job is to make ChatGPT's life easier by providing context, providing input, and creating a prompt that makes sense for it to follow step by step by step. Okay. So a lot of you will be right now asking probably, well, what does that look like in practice? Like how do we actually craft that? So let me break down an example for you. We'll pop this actual prompt here in a second to ChatGPT. I'll walk you through the input as well as the output and how we iterate that. But this is what it might look like in practice, okay? At the very top, what we're doing is assigning a persona for the ChatGPT platform, right? What we're saying right here is you're an expert recruiter and a resume coach. Please help me tailor my resume for a specific job description, okay? Follow these steps in order and provide your answers in structured format, okay? So that is the foundation, this persona for ChatGPT. What this allows you to do is take the persona of this specific recruiter or resume coach, and we could even specify, if we wanted to, who is working with clinical research coordinators, even more context for ChatGPT. So we're going to assign a persona so it knows what angle am I tackling this from. The next step we want to do is a logical step flow. So what we're saying here is first, analyze the job description and a couple of bullet points there. Second, analyze my resume. Okay. Third, run a gap analysis. Fourth, suggest solutions for those gaps. Fifth, rewrite resume bullet points. And there's also sixth one that is about a resume summary. So now, once again, ChatGPT, what it has is not just the persona, but the logical steps that we're asking it to follow. What are we looking for initially? What does it do with that information? What are we expecting as an output? Okay, so step flow is right there. Next, we have the context. I already emphasized a couple of times previously, but the context here is about the job description itself. We're copy pasting right there on step 1, as well as our resume. We're copying that in step 2, analyze my resume. We're providing that there. Now, one quick caveat here, you notice that with personal details removed. So for example, Rishi's resume, you notice at the very top, he had his name, his location, LinkedIn profile, email, phone number, all these things. You want to remove those just for the sake of privacy. So that way, all you're providing is your experiences as opposed to your private information. Okay, so what we've done, we've assigned a persona, we've gone through logical step flow, and we've provided input in terms of context, job description, as well as our resume. The next step we're asking is define output. So toward the bottom of these steps, you'll notice fifth, rewrite the resume bullet points. Okay, so that is an output that we're looking for. And the sixth point there that you won't see in this screenshot is once again the summary piece. Okay, so this is how you can break down a prompt typically, and you can adjust this to any really use case that you have. If you wanted to be an interview prepper, you could say you're an expert interview preparation coach. And then what we're saying, analyze the job description, provide us 10 questions that might be asked based on this JD. Here's my resume. Please provide me with 5 example answers that I can provide for these questions that we were talking about above. So once again, the format here applies to any use case that you have in your career search. Now, I want to re-emphasize what I said earlier about not replacing effort. You'll notice that if we want to replace effort, then we're going to do something like this, an awfully general prompt. But if we don't replace effort, we're just being more sharper, more focused, more clear, then we utilize the same amount of effort in terms of time to craft these very purposeful prompts, but the output is going to be that much better. So we're not looking to replace effort. We're looking to increase customization, accelerate clarity. Okay. So let's see what this looks like in practice. I'm going to pop this open here and give me just a second. I'm going to navigate over ChatGPT for you. And we're going to actually put this to use and show you what it looks like in practice. So just a second, and I'm going to navigate here and share this tab. I'm just going to confirm that we're following along. Fantastic. And now what we have here, you're an expert recruiter, resume coach, the exact same prompt that we had earlier in that screenshot. We have our logical step flow, JD right here. I'm going to come back in just a second. I'm going to copy paste over a example job description for here. We're going to pop over here. Okay, we have a right here. Fantastic. About the job, clinical research coordinator. It's going to take us down a little bit here. Responsibilities, qualifications. We have all these details. Now we're going to get the second step of the flow, analyze my resume. Okay, same thing here. Copy paste our resume here. I'm going to go and get it from my document here on the side. So just a second. We have right here. I'm going to come back up so I can show you what it looks like. So we have Jane Doe's resume. Let's say city and state. I'm just going to put in, since I'm North Carolina based, I'm going to put in Charlotte, NC, Jane Doe, LinkedIn, phone number, etc. Okay. Professional summary, 5 years of experience, blah, blah, blah. Professional experience, research associate. We have clinical research coordinator. We have some skills in here. We have education in the mix. We have certifications, just like Rishi mentioned, we have publications and so on. Okay. After that, we have our gap analysis. What we're looking for to do is just essentially identify, comparing the JD to our resume, where do we have gaps, okay? Identify requirements well covered, which are weak and which are missing. So if they look for something specific in our resume, let's say a certification, a skill, or an experience, does our resume currently cover that or does it not? Our job is to help ChatGPT understand that is what we're looking for as an output. Provide the gap analysis. Tell us exactly which skills we're covering well, experience we're covering well, and what certifications, publications, skills, and so that we're not covering. What do you not see in our resume that we should have in there? And after that, our job is to ask, well, if we have a gap in there, do we actually have that experience so we can input it, or do we not? If we don't have it, can we build it somehow? Okay. Fourth, solutions for those gaps. So we're going to reframe something, or if something is missing, can we find transferable skills from our past experiences? Rewriting those resume bullet points, aligning with the JD, use action verbs, quantify impact where possible. And 6, provide a professional summary, just like Rishi noted in his resume early on. One thing that I always like that at the very end is please do not make large assumptions. Instead, confirm with me and ask questions if you need more information to fully optimize my resume. Okay, so now what we're doing is we're providing ChatGPT permission to not make assumptions, but ask us like, hey, if they're looking for skill X, Y, and Z, it can ask us, do you have that skill? And we can tell yes or no, or if yes, what kind of experience that is. Okay, so let's see what this looks like in practice. I'm going to pop right here. I'm going to give it a second to generate. But once again, the whole prompt is now here for us. We can iterate, we can edit down the line if we need to, but that's our initial foundational prompt. Okay, that's the input we're providing. We're going to go down here. We have our ChatGPT response. Very strong starting point. Got a foundation for a competitive candidate, and your biotech clinical experience will translate well. Fantastic. Okay, so step one, JD analysis. What do they look for? The top 7 to 10 skills. Now, all of these, obviously, you can go to job descriptions themselves. You can scan with your own eyes, and you can probably find the same exact things here. But it does not hurt to have a quote-unquote fact checker for you who will go through the same document, analyze for those same skills. Okay, so here's our foundation. Repeated themes, compliance, patient-centeredness, accuracy, teamwork, and so on. Fantastic. Step 2, okay, analysis of our resume. So what do we provide as our past experiences? Career intent, we're applying for position X. Hands-on procedures, we've had blah, blah, blah. Okay, let me see here. Can you clarify? And actually, for the sake of our time, I'm going to say, please move forward without my clarifications and complete the step flow immediately without my additional input. Now, the reason I'm doing this is simply for the sake of our time, since we only have a few minutes left here. If you really want to optimize your resume, once again, these are the questions that you could now go through and you could respond to those questions. But let's see what it says if we say just, ignore those clarifications for now. I'm going to give it just a second to think through, and it's going to clarify, or it's going to provide us an output even without that additional input. Okay, so that one didn't work. Sometimes with ChatGPT that happens. It's not a bad thing that it happened for our example today. What I'm going to do instead, we're going to go back here. I'm going to copy that prompt, and I'm going to just take off this one, once again, for the sake of our time today, and we'll regenerate that one for our purpose so you see what it looks like in practice. Okay, so same thing here, once again, without those additional clarifications. We have the JD analysis, and let's see what it generates for us in terms of steps 2 through 6. Okay, so now we get to this resume analysis that you didn't see in the previous example, once again, given that I added that prompting at the end. But our main experiences based on our resume are X, Y, and Z. Most relevant sections are clinical research, regulatory compliance, skills section, certifications. Fantastic. Now, gap analysis. Okay, so super helpful for us to understand where do we stand in terms of our current qualifications. Clinical trial coordination. Okay, coverage is strong. Gaps or weakness, well covered. No problem at all. Most of these seem to be pretty strong, moderate, and here's the weak one. Okay, clinical procedures. Add only if you have relevant transferable skills, lab work, sample prep, and so on. Okay, so now we see a gap that we might need to work on. Okay, we're going to keep on moving down. Gap solutions, reframing. Okay, add a bullet explicitly referencing patient constant orientation and so on. Reframe molecular biology work to show transferable clinical precisions, data integrity, and adherence. Fantastic. Okay, transferable skills, use X, Y, and Z. So we're getting all these tools, all these foundational things that are on puzzle pieces, if you will, that we can plug in should we want to. Now, the fun piece, okay, rewritten resume bullet points. So for the clinical research coordinator, let's see really quick what we have in our initial one. I'm going to come back up here. Our resume, we'll research associate, leading design, managed a small team, collaborated, presented findings, and so on. Clinical research, we have coordinated, partnered, prepared, and so on. Okay, so you can always come back to your initial draft and then compare what do we have here. Okay, coordinate phase 2 oncology, rare disease trials, managing patient recruitment, blah, blah, blah. Maintain accurate source documentation, and so on. Okay, so what we're now getting is updated, optimized bullet points that you still need to, of course, fact check, but hopefully we get some ideas, some inspiration, if you will. Okay, research associate 2, well, supported translation studies, bridging preclinical research to clinical development. Great. Okay, once again, checking that if that is something we like or if it's not. Additional enhancements, we can add a bullet point about X, Y, and Z. And if we now also want a professional summary, this is a very objective, direct, clinical research coordinator-based resume summary that we can adopt should we want to. Now, at the very end, if you want to iterate, you can say something like, I did not enjoy the way you formatted X, Y, and Z. Can you reframe it to a more direct, directly relevant example? Or I did not like the way you used the terms X, Y, and Z. Can you make it more conversational? So we can definitely iterate these outputs as we need to. For the sake of our example today, we don't have the time to do that. But let me go back to our Google Slides here for a second. So we ran through that. The last little bit I want to cover for the next about 30 seconds is this. Every time you get that output, don't take it just blindly and accept it as it is. Okay, you always want to fact check and make sure that it really aligns with what you're looking to do with the output. So a good test for you is to check these 3 things. First, your actual experience. Is the output that we're receiving, is it true and honest to what we've done? So if ChatGPT is telling us that here's an updated bullet point that says we've done X, Y, and Z with, let's say, improved efficiency or saved money or generated some kind of an output or publications and so on, and that's not actually true what we've done, we don't want to use that bullet point, obviously, right? So always fact check. Are these bullet points true and honest to what we've actually done in the past? Second, the JD. Does it really highlight what this employer cares about? So when we get that bullet point, list of bullet points, we still want to go through it manually and see, are all those skills highlighted that we want to highlight? Especially if there's a gap analysis, we see there's a gap, but we have that skill. Is it still coming through or is it not? We want to fact check that one. And finally, our voice. Does this sound like you, or does it really, sound awfully robotic, overhyped? Does he use terms like boosted or embraced or fostered, all of these very AI-ish terms that you will see in every AI-generated resume? So you want to go through with these kind of questions as a lens to see and make sure that your resume and the output that you're providing for those applications is still authentic, is still honest to you and who you are, as opposed to just taking it once again without any grains of salt, accepting the ChatGPT output as it is. Okay, so today's demo is just a sample. You can iterate it as you want to. You can utilize these for many use cases, but the prompts that I showed you earlier, you can kind of customize those with logical step flows, assigning personas, defining outputs to your use case and your needs specifically. Okay, not the only way to use AI. There's a million approaches that you can take, but hopefully this gives you a foundation as you navigate your AI journey, resumes, cover letters, interview prep, and so on. Okay, and that is all that I wanted to share with you in terms of optimizing resumes using ChatGPT.
Thank you, Mr. Palomaki, for a fantastic lecture. At this time, we will open up the floor for questions from the audience. As a reminder, please place your questions in the chat. Thank you.
Yeah, so I can talk a little bit about this, and Lasse, feel free to chime in. I think, there's a lot of ways to sort of effectively tailor. For me, it's I tend to have a bank of just like all the things I've done in sort of one big long format, and then I will sort of like copy and paste things into specific resumes that I want to send off to different folks. For me, I think this goes back to something Lasse talked about in his talk, is like sort of what direction do you want to go in this moment? So for me, I transitioned out of doing benchwork computational science into doing more management. Now I'm at a nonprofit supporting other scientists. So I've sort of moved my career away from like physical science into more supporting scientists. So if you track my resumes, it sort of shows that change over time. And then a lot of it for me comes down to sort of what Lasse was talking about. It's like, what words are you using? Are you catering that language to the different groups? Like, for instance, academics are going to value publications more than patents, but industry will value the opposite, right? So the order in which you place things on the resume will also reflect sort of what career path you want to go down. So that's my answer. Lasse, I don't know if you want to add anything.
I think that's spot on. And since we talked about ChatGPT, you can literally ask this kind of a question from ChatGPT as well. You can follow up with the prompt that we have iterated and say, okay, fantastic. Thanks for that output. Now I want to customize this document to position X. What are the key changes I need to be making based on what they prioritize in that job posting? So you can iterate using ChatGPT, but based on what Rishi said, everything there is spot on as well.
I mean, I don't know, everything in moderation, right? So, you can always have too much customization. I think this goes back to a little bit to the last one for me, is sort of, what are you shooting for? Like, what sort of goals do you want out of that resume? For me, if I'm telling people to apply for gigs, I say don't apply to everything, because then I think that is where you get into trouble with, you have to customize a lot of things unless you're doing a lot of stuff with GPT, which can help in that sense for sure. So for me, I tend to like pick different categories and then I have lanes. So I will have a set of communications based sort of conversations or about around resumes. I'll have one based on science. I'll have one based on management. And so those are the three sort of buckets for me. So it really comes down to like, what direction do I want to go in this point in time in my career?
Yeah, and the only thing I'll add to what Rishi was mentioning there is that when we think about customizing a resume, some folks think that it's a 2-hour process. It does not have to be. It can be a 15-minute process based on the job description. So it can literally be changing, let's say the professional summary, you talk about, I'm really good at X, Y, and Z, but the job posting you're applying to next talks about A, B, and C. So now you swap those X, Y, and Z to A, B, and C, right? So you want to understand what is expected of me based on the job posting and how do I input those key skills that they look for into the summary, into the bullet points, and prioritize those. So you don't need to rehaul the full document, just strategically place those key skills and certifications they look for in an order of importance, just like Rishi mentioned in his session earlier on.
I'll also add to that. There was a question I think Ritesh asked in the comments, but it's sort of like, how do you know what skills to sort of talk about? And for me, a big component of this, and this goes to the customization question as well, is use the language from the job description. Yeah, this is the question. Thank you. So use the language from the job description. So an example when I was hiring folks is, so I'm a genetic mapping person by training. So we were doing genetic mapping projects and I had listed in the thing like, hey, we're looking for somebody who can do genetic mapping. And we wrote the job description, put it on the website, whatever, people applied. The first person who looked at the resume, this was sort of before ChatGPT became really popular, was a human, but it was an HR person, and they have no science background. So they said, cool. Rishi said, look for genetic mapping. The candidate had written, I've done biparental crosses and I've done genome-wide association studies. So anyone who does genetic mapping knows that those are two versions of genetic mapping. They're just more specific. But the HR person didn't know that because they don't have that training, and they threw the resume out. And I had to go back in and look for it. And then that just made me change the way that I thought about how do I understand, like, sort of what are these keywords. GPT, Lasse can talk about this, will do a much better job of this now for both managers and for resume builders, but use the language of the job description.
Yeah, that's a really key thing. And one thing I like about the skills section as well is oftentimes what we see with folks using resumes, they have a specific skill. It's only mentioned in the skills section. Ideally, what you do is you showcase how you actually applied that skill in the bullet point. So I'm not an expert in your space. So I'm not going to even try to create one genetic mapping example, anything like that. But let me just use Excel. That's a common tool, maybe even something that's utilized in these positions. So if you mention Excel in the skills section, ideally you have a bullet point that says, analyze sets of data using Excel to blah, blah, blah. So now it's not just a skill that is listed in a skills section that doesn't give any context, but the recruiter, I imagine, know exactly why you've used Excel to use pivot tables or something else, and what is the output you created based on using that tool.
Lasse, do you want to take this one first?
Yeah, I can tackle this. So my response will be very short and simple. Recruiters don't care about so much about creative things unless it's a creative field. What they care about is the ease of understanding what you've done. The purpose of a resume is to communicate clearly and concisely and easily to understand what you have done. So the resume itself is almost like a display cabinet, right? There's the content that you've done in the past, and that's just displaying as easy as possible to understand format as you can. So plain and simple is always better. Just like Rishi's example that you saw in his portion, black and white, one column, super simple, very logical flow in terms of what you've done, publications, skills, and so on. So do not try to make it awfully creative for the purpose of displaying that. Recruiters want to make it very easy for them. So you want to make their life as easy as possible. There might be AI integrations down the line that are a little bit different, but right now, boring is the best.
Yeah, I think I'll add a little bit to that, which is, so I agree, boring is best. I do think that people tend to cram a lot into resumes because they don't know how to edit, right? So I think a big component of resume building is and this goes to the customization question, is like you have to know what to cut And I think that there are tricks that you can say if like you want to talk about things, but you don't have the space, rather than getting fancy with like having 2 columns or like getting smaller fonts or whatever. Just say like, hey, I worked at this company, and maybe it's not super relevant to the job you're applying for. Just say like, ask me about it in the interview, right? So this way you can avoid those things like gaps in your resume, but you still have that information available and people know to ask you about it, but it's not going to mess up your formatting.
I'll give you a quick answer for this one. So ATS friendly, what it really means is that it's a format the ATS system can read. ATS systems don't typically reject the document based on whether it's a keyword or not. There might be some knockout questions about, do you have specific education? Do you have a citizenship or sponsorship, things like that? They might be knockout questions like that. But as long as your resume is readable by the ATS system, typically that means that it's ATS friendly. So once again, black and white, no shapes, no columns, no pie charts and things like that. The ATS system, you can think about almost like a digital filing cabinet. The resume, the cover letter, all those are going to be filed there. The recruiter can go through that listing of database of resumes and cover letters based on filtering with keywords, something like that. But ATS friendly, what it really means is, can this system read my document? And since we don't know what system they're using, typically boring is better, like we talked about in the previous response.
I think, sir, following up on that, I think that also goes to the customization thing, right? Because boring is better means less customization, or at least you're only customizing language. You're not customizing.
Correct.
So that should also save you time.
Yeah, thanks for the clarification. I agree with that.
Let's see if we're putting answer. So I think for this, because it's a postdoc position, I'm assuming it's an academic postdoc position. It's a lot of academic positions are things related to sort of publications. It's you have to think of it sort of in the mindset of like, who is the person hiring you? What do they care about? So for industry positions, it's things like patents or experience or collaboration, teamwork, working with others. And sort of academic positions, it's more about, if you're a scientist, it's more about the science, showcasing not only your skills, but, like, are you publishing in good journals? Are you publishing consistently? And so I think for that's the only difference for me between aside from small language tweaks, is the order in which information is presented. So a good example, I think, for academic versus industry is I will do select publications or select talks for an academic position, and it will put that near the top. I will also put education near the top. So PhD, University of Georgia. So people will say like, oh, University of Georgia, that was a good, plant science school. That produces good PhD students. So like that gives me some sort of vetting. Versus an industry resume, I will put education almost near the bottom, if at all, and people can talk to me about it, right? So I think that in that sense, the order matters, and I will much more highlight sort of patents and previous work experience with the impacts and outcomes.
Thank you, Ian, Rishi, and Lasse, for sharing your time and insights on this important topic. Thank you to the cast for providing their experience and expertise in supporting this webinar program. To SIVB membership and education committees for planning and supporting this webinar series, and to all of you for joining us today. As a reminder, this event has been recorded and will be made available online in the next few weeks. The contact details of our speakers will be provided, are currently on your screen. Please feel free to connect with them if you have more questions. SIVB will be holding our annual meeting and 80th anniversary celebration at the Peppermill Resort and Spa in Reno, Nevada from June 6th to 10th, 2026. We are developing an exciting scientific program with a phenomenal lineup of speakers. We cannot wait to share them all with you. You can learn more about the meeting at sivb.org/meetings or just by scanning the QR code that you see on your screen. Please remain safe and healthy and have a wonderful day. I hope to see you all at our next webinar in 2026 and in Reno for for our 80th anniversary celebration next June. Thank you.